I want to thank all of you for coming out to the second annual DNR Safety Meeting. I'm Dan Marlowe, the president of LBCA, and I especially want to thank you for coming out on such a beautiful morning. We hadn't seen a Saturday morning like this in I don't think a month. So thank you for coming. I would like to introduce a few people that are here. Elizabeth Gill is the immediate past president of LBCA. Lee Penland in the back is he is the chair of Water Safety. And we have Jason Roberson of the DNR and Spencer Palmer of the DNR who will be speaking to us this morning. Let me say that this meeting was started in 2024 because of the large number of citations and BUIs that we had in 2023. And we said we've got to do something to bring these numbers down. We met with DNR. They said the best way to do that is to have a safety meeting at the beginning of every year and get everybody on the same page, review the rules, and go from there. And this also falls under LBCA's 4 core principles, which are water quality, water safety, preservation, and community building. So LBCA is committed to boater education because if you follow the boating laws and the rules, you're not only creating a safer environment for yourself, but for everyone else on the lake. And you're going to have a lesser chance of getting pulled over by the DNR. And I always like to tell people, it's better to meet the DNR on land than on the water. So, in addition to the meeting, we also created a safety flyer. We have some of these in the back for you. So we put the top 4 reasons people were getting pulled over on here. And we dated this 2023. There were the exact same things in 2024. And then on the back of it, we said, well, in the unfortunate case you do get pulled over, here's what to expect. Because things have changed over the years. In 2025, we took the flyer and we printed it in the back of the directories so that you can have that. And we'll put these on the website too if you want to print some more out, put them in your boat, whatever. So we also did safety videos because we are committed to boater education and for lake safety. And I would like to, in closing, just let me emphasize a few points. And these kind of come from some rumors or innuendos and, are bandied around the lake. But first of all, LBCA cannot tell the DNR what to do, how to perform their job. And the DNR is a state law enforcement agency, and they are paid by the state of Georgia, not by LBCA. The second point is LBCA does not want you to get pulled over by the DNR, but to prevent that from happening, you got to do your part. You got to know what the laws and the rules are, and you have to abide by them. And that is going to greatly decrease the chance of ever being pulled over. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Jason Roberson. Jason has been with the DNR for over 20 years, I think coming up on 25.
Yes, sir.
Or 25, somewhere in there. And he's had an illustrious career with the DNR. In 2012, he was the State Ranger of the Year. In 2014, he was the Georgia Boating Officer of the Year. Also in 2014, he was the Southern States Boating Law Administrators Caucus Officer of the Year. And in 2015, he was the National Boating Officer of the Year. So let's please give a warm welcome to Jason Roberson.
You did some research there. I didn't give him any of that. Guys, I'm Jason Roberson. He told you a little bit about my work life, but what he didn't tell you is, the worst part of my job over the 25 years has been delivering bad news to families that have lost a loved one, whether it be on Lake Altoona, Lake Lanier, and that happens. You all watch the news, you see how often that happens. So every drowning, every water death, every boat fatality, I've been in the mix of that for 25 years. So with that being said, water safety is very important to me. And I know that a lot of times we get, we're here enforcing, for the most part, recreational activities, right? We're doing law enforcement, whether it's people fishing, hunting, boating, that's your recreation free time. And nobody wants to see the police even on the highway. So we understand you don't want to see us on the water either. You're up here trying to enjoy yourself, but my job at the end of the day is to make sure that each one of you and your loved ones get home safely. So a big deal of what we do is education. Now, we're not teaching classes all the time. The way we do education is when we see somebody messing up or breaking a law, we pull them over and educate the public. Now, that can be done in many different ways, right? A normal stop where we're just telling somebody about a minor infraction that's not a safety issue, not a huge safety issue, those stops are only going to inconvenience you about 2 to 3 minutes. So if you'll bear with us, give us a little bit of your time, we're going to educate you, we're going to go through a safety inspection, make sure that you have all the proper equipment, tell you the reason for the stop, and all we're trying to do is change behavior. That's all we're trying to do. I've got a feeling that the people that are here today are not the people that we're probably going to be dealing with, right? Because, I mean, yeah, we may pull you over, but you're here, you think it's important enough for you to come out and learn a little bit about why we're stopping people, for you to learn the laws, the rules, the regulations. This was important enough to you to waste some time on Saturday morning to come out. The rest of your neighbors didn't think that, so they probably are going to be the ones that are not as educated, right? So a normal boat stop, let me go through that really quick. So let's say, just for an example, this boat dock straight across here, if we saw someone violating the 100-foot law, does everybody know what the 100-foot law is? Okay, we'll talk about that in a little while. But let's say we saw someone violating the 100-foot law there. We're going to turn on the blue lights. We're going to pull over, pull up beside you. Generally speaking, it's going to be on your port side. We'll put the starboard side of our boat on the port side of yours, and then we will tell you the reason for the stop. We're always going to be courteous. We're always going to be professional. If we're not, that's when y'all need to contact me. If my officers are not being professional and courteous, I want to know about it. We're going to tell you the reason for the stop, then we're going to ask for your safety equipment. A life jacket for everyone on board, a fire extinguisher, a throwable device. We may ask for your boat registration and ID. Simple, right? Should take literally a couple of minutes, because your job as a boat captain is to know where all of that stuff is in case there's an emergency on your boat. So a couple of minutes, we're pushing away and we're gone. If the violation was minor enough that we think we can change behavior by just simply giving you a verbal warning, that's what we're going to do. If we think that it might take a written warning, then we're going to do that. Then it goes to a citation, and let's say worst case scenario, you're under the influence of alcohol and or drugs, and it results in an arrest. So majority of the time, those things are going to be handled one of those first 3 ways, either verbal guidance, a warning, a written warning, or a citation, right? So
Can I ask you about the registration?
sure.
Can I take a photo of it and keep it on my phone, or do you want the actual card?
I'm good with a photo. We're not splitting hairs. That's one thing I want you to understand. We are not out here splitting hairs on anything that we do. We're looking for flagrant violations.
I can't remember. Do y'all send us a registration every year? I thought I was just good with the number.
It's every 3 years. We send you the registration decal every 3 years. So, well, that's if you renewed your registration. So if we see the decal, that we're probably not going to ask for it. If for whatever reason we can't see that decal, then we might ask for it. And if you're suspected, well, part of the reason we do the safety inspection is to be able to see that someone can not only produce that equipment, but it allows us an opportunity to observe behavior. So a lot of impairment can be seen during the safety inspection, whether you refuse to get out of your seat, whether you get up and stumble around the boat or fumble with a life jacket or whatever. Those are things we're looking for. And so we may ask for that registration card just to see if, do your fingers work? Can you pull the registration card out of your wallet or something? So
Is that decal color coded?
Yes, ma'am.
Years?
Yes, ma'am. That changes color every year. So, yep. And it has the expiration year on it as well. But that's how a basic safety or a basic boating stop will do, or will be conducted. We're not out here making a lot of safety inspections just to look at your life jackets. If we pull you over, it's for a valid reason. Okay, so that's how we'll do business, and that's how we've been doing business. How we'll continue to do business.
Oh, life jackets. A lot of them come in those, the zip up containers. They're sometimes not readily. Do we need to have them readily available and easy to get to? I mean, I got them. That's most of the kids, all the kids have life jackets on.
Right.
We usually have a couple of other.
It's fine if they're in the zip up bags, as long as you can get to it. Where it would become an issue is if you've got an anchor and 150 feet of rope and everything's tied in together on top of it, and you just physically can't get to them, then that's a problem. But if they're, as long as you can get to them in a reasonable amount of time, like I said, we're not splitting hairs. I've worked 25 years on Lanier and Altoona, and spending any amount of time up here is like a vacation for me as well. So this is a welcome thing for me to be up here, and we're not going to be splitting hairs. So, but we'll go through, and just feel free if you have any questions on anything that's brought up during the presentation, feel free to ask.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Go ahead.
So I work on our what's called our CERT team, our critical incident response team, and I would challenge you on that, just in the way of, like, I work boating incidents a lot, and most of them are fatal, and the majority of the fatal incidents are because people aren't wearing a life jacket, and then when an accident happens, they're not readily accessible, or they're not in the state of mind at that point to go, oh, I need to go dig out life jackets, unzip the bag, pull life jackets out, and pass them out to people. So we see a lot of drownings and stuff because of no one's out there expecting an accident to happen or an incident to happen. But if a boat hits your boat and out of nowhere you're not expecting it, are you going to be able to safely keep everybody safe by getting a life jacket on, or having those tucked in their seat and everything else? It's just more of a, no one's going to write you a ticket over that, but as a safety thing, I would challenge you to try to be a little more vigilant about having those accessible for people. And nobody thinks it's going to happen to them, but it happens every year, and it happens a lot on our lake. So just,
that's a very good point.
Safety thing, yeah. Just be aware of that.
And how many of you have, I would imagine everyone in here has been on some kind of charter boat trip at some point. What's the first thing the captain does when you get on that boat? He's going to tell you where the fire extinguisher is, where the life jackets are. He might tell you where the margaritas are, but he's going to tell you where all the safety equipment is, right? And that's a good idea when you have guests and visitors coming in out of town. Make sure they know where that stuff is, because what's going to happen if there's a water death or any kind of injury that happens on your boat? What's going to happen to you? You got any attorneys in the room? So are you going to get sued? Is somebody going to file some kind of suit? Whether it's your fault or not, you're going to get sued. Do you think it would look better as an attorney? Would it look better if before they got on my boat, I made them look through the safety book, I showed them the safety thing that the Lake Association puts out, and then I told them where all the safety equipment was? I mean, that's on you guys. Do that stuff, and I think we'll all have better results. The last couple of years have been relatively safe. I think the deaths have been less than 10 on each lake. I've seen as many as in the low 20s on Lanier in a year. So it happens a lot more than you think.
I know the stats. We had 26 boating fatalities last year.
Is that statewide?
Statewide,
Yeah.
26 fatalities and 40-something incidents that were major injury. So no, that's all over the state, not just, we don't have very many up here, thank goodness. I'm sure y'all probably remember our last one was the Burton Island incident.
Yeah.
And then I worked a fatality last summer on Hartwell. So.
Have you ever pulled a drowning victim out with a life vest on?
None. I have one in my career.
Well,
and that was in the Chattahoochee River, and the only reason they drowned is the current pushed them under a tree and they couldn't get out. So No, it's very uncommon for someone to drown with a life jacket on.
My fatality last year was wearing a life jacket, but he also got hit with a jet ski at 70 miles an hour. So, yeah, you know, there's other extenuating circumstances.
Is so going back getting pullover. If I'm getting pulled over, it's 100% reason why we're getting pulled over.
Absolutely. Okay. Now,
I think that's good.
Now here's something to understand, okay? Our policy on boat stops, the law says we do not have to have a reason to stop anyone, okay? We don't have to have a reason. But our policy is that reasonable suspicion is preferred. Now, for you attorneys in the room, you understand reasonable suspicion, probable cause are totally different things. But we are always going to have a reason. It may not be a violation of the law. It may be something that is a normal contributing factor to a boat accident. Like if your grandkids are up here and they've got a bunch of their college buddies up here and there's 3 people dancing on the bow of the boat right in front of the driver. Now, would we all agree that that may not be against the law, but it may cause them to get in an accident? So what am I going to do? We're going to pull them over and educate them. Hey, I understand what you're doing. Get to a cove, go somewhere where you can carry on your party and carry on, but don't do that driving down the lake. So there could be things that we see that would require us to stop and take action to try to change the behavior so that an accident is not taking place. Does that make sense? Okay. Anything else before we move on? Yes, sir.
I had a question about requirements on the boat as far as a working horn.
So on inland waters, which we're in here, a horn is not required. What we're going to ask for is a life jacket for everyone on the boat, a fire extinguisher, and a throwable device. The Coast Guard requirements would still be, a horn would be required, but we don't ask for it.
I thought we did a whistle.
You just mentioned 3 things. What was the last?
A throwable device?
So
Yes, ma'am. So
that changed. You don't need a whistle.
a throwable device would be either a square, it looks like a seat cushion. It's called a Type 4 throwable device. And it's meant for if someone falls overboard, you can kind of sling it like a Frisbee and it'll actually go where you want it to. If you've ever tried to throw a life jacket, they get caught in the wind and you could have one of the pitchers for the Braves throwing one and he wouldn't be able to throw it to the back of the room here. But a throwable device, you throw it like a Frisbee and you can get pretty good distance and accuracy out of it. So it's not a requirement. Good idea. Yeah, it's a great idea, but it's not a requirement by law for us. Yeah, you're not paddling that boat. You're calling a buddy, but yeah.
Oh, shit.
Anything else before we move on?
Jason, I want to ask you from the 100-foot room. Over time, when I'm feeling small grandchildren, I try to drop them off close to my dock, and obviously I get grow idle speed, they'll sink. So how much leeway do you have there when you're coming back to your own place?
Well, that's a lot of gray area, right? The law, unfortunately, is black and white. So the law doesn't differentiate whether it's your dock or his dock or my dock. It's the law's the law. So we won't know if we see you violating that. We won't have a clue whether it's your dock or somebody else's, right? So you may very well get pulled over. What we're looking for on the 100-foot law, and we're going to get this out now. What I'm looking for is a safety issue or something that's going to cause property damage. And I would think that each of you would be on board with that. If somebody's causing property damage, you spend an awful lot of money on these docks, and if you've got a wake boat coming by throwing a wake like this, you don't want that against your dock. But somebody barely over idle speed, 80 feet away from a dock, is that causing a safety issue? Probably not. So we're more than likely not going to stop that boat. If we do, it's going to be just for some simple education, okay? Now, if you're coming in on plane, we're probably going to talk to you. So, we're not splitting hairs here. We're not trying to cause an issue, but understand this. If my officers do stop you for 100-foot law, they all have rangefinders in their boats, and they all are very familiar with the law. So if they're stopping you, it's for a good, valid reason. We're not going to be splitting hairs if you're 95 feet away, you know, in your pontoon boat going 2,000 RPMs. That's not what we're looking for. Okay. So I hope that answers your question. There's a lot of gray there. It's very vague, but we'll be stopping them. But that's the same thing. We're not going to be splitting hairs. If you're 180 feet away from a dock, we're probably not going to talk to you. If you're, you know, well within that, we're definitely going to be talking to you. So, yeah, I mean, that's these lakes are the primary reason that law was put in the books. So I don't think it's changed one thing. Now granted, I'm new up here, but what do you think? Is it better?
The only complaint I got on me last year was for writing somebody that ticket, and they called and complained on me for writing it, and they were at 75 feet.
75 feet. Yeah.
With a wake surf, like doing a big wave.
It does happen. It's going to happen, and but I don't think it is as bad as before the law was put there. People are at least given a little bit of berth.
I think y'all as an association have done a really good job of trying to educate people. I remember all the Facebook videos and stuff that y'all put out about where in the lake was acceptable, and it seems that the majority of people stick to that. We still have outliers here and there, and we still get calls and complaints about it, and we try to be in those areas when the complaints happen. So, you know.
Well, I mean, more presence from us. They're not gonna make it a no wake zone more than likely. I'll just tell you, it is an act of Congress literally to get a no wake zone. So, but as far as us working it more, yeah, we'll be glad to sit up there and work it. And that's probably just education. I don't know if you have a rental home up in that area or if it's just people letting their kids out on the docks. You know, I don't think.
Is there a speed limit for those jet skis?
There's not a speed limit. There's a too fast for conditions law that kind of is a catch-all and covers everything. But I'll be honest with you, unless you're in a boating accident, we're probably not going to be charging too fast for conditions unless there's some kind of extenuating circumstance.
Yeah, I'm still trying to track down some guys that were harassing wildlife early this summer on 2 jet skis chasing ducks around. And I wasn't able to get the registration, but I have the video and pictures of the jet skis with the teenage operators, and I'm actively looking for those jet skis. So if I can find them, then yeah, there's going to be a conversation. So I know that there's someone that lives up by the rock up there that has a camera on their dock, and they send us violations every year. So we try to follow up with that. If we have a clear picture of the registration, we usually make a phone call and give verbal guidance on that and say, hey, you know, if we continue to get these, then we're going to address it with a citation. And most of the time, it's someone's grandchild or child that is young and they need to be calmed down a little bit. It's very rare that we get adult violations on jet skis up here. So
if someone is using your jet ski, boat, whatever, and they're in violation of any of the safety issues, safety rules, y'all can still be charged with that. And especially that comes in with these kids on jet skis. You've got a 15-year-old, 16-year-old kid out there riding jet skis and they're acting a fool. We're probably going to come deal with you on your dock instead of dealing with that kid. We're going to educate the kid, but a lot of times educating the parents is what it takes. And I hate to say that, but it's.
What we've told people up here is if as long as you have that square decal on it, we're probably not going to mess with you too bad, because we realize how small they are and how hard it is to get the full registration on it. So if you have that square number on it, then we're good if it's registered. But the ones that are towable do not have to be. So like the hydrofoils that you see behind the wake boats, those don't have to be, but if they're motorized or handheld, those have to be. And then all your navigation rules still apply. So.
Any other questions on that? So this is a relatively small lake, right? I mean, compared to 62 shore miles, compared to 580 that I'm used to. On Lake Lanier, we patrol it in 6 zones, and with the cutbacks and everything we've had, sometimes they're only doing that with 1 and 2 boats. So they can't even get to the entire lake. They're working a small portion. This lake with one boat, we can patrol every inch of shoreline every day that we're working. So we're not going to constantly be moving. We're not going to stay constantly moving, but we are going to hit the whole lake at some point. And then if we have problem areas where we know that people are prone to bust a no wake zone, you know, or 100-foot law or whatever, yeah, we're going to tuck back in and we're going to observe. I mean, it'd be silly not to, because you know, you don't see near as much while you're moving as you do while you're sitting still. So anything else on that?
I think the question maybe is you're giving a perception that you're trying to catch people instead of.
Well, I mean,
I just said, but if you're out visible, if I see myself, if you're visible, I'm going to be much more cautious. But if I don't see you, then I'm not going to be more. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
I like having the cop on the, the officer on the interstate, and then when everyone sees them, everyone slows down, right?
I fully understand that. I fully understand that, and I respect that opinion. But you know, if we're driving around and we drive past your dock and we're heading back south down the lake, then we're gone. But if I sit in your cove for 30 minutes, you know, oh man, they've been up here. Why are they here? So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword there. You can't have a perfect world, but we can't. Lord, they'd fire me next year or next week if I was burning that much gas, spending 8 hours a day out here. So
a lot of the places where we're sitting are constant complaint zones as well. Like this one right here is every year is a #1 complaint zone, especially the families that have kids out there swimming in the no wake zone. And then the 76 area is a constant every year. And a lot of times we go up there and we sit and it may not be busy. And if we go up there and turn around and leave, then I'm sure you can tell them as soon as we're gone, boom, 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 boom. And showing that presence by sitting there is a deterrent for the people in that complaint area. So we have, it's a double-edged sword there. I mean, we have to try to do our best to work the complaints. You know, people in these areas, if they don't see us there and we just ride through, then we get complaints that we're not working the complaints. So
that's a great way to look at it. You know, it's as slow as the boat will go and maintain steering control. So basically, as soon as you bump it into gear, that's what we're looking for. But if we can see white water coming off the back of that boat, that's what's going to draw our attention. And a lot of these jet skis have what's called a no wake mode. I don't know where they came up with that, because they're throwing about a 6 or 8 inch wake off the back of them when they're in no wake mode. So, you know, you've got to be cognizant of what you're driving. You know, if I can see somebody in a 52-foot Carver creating no wake down on Lanier, your pontoon boat should not be creating a larger wake in a no wake zone than that 52-foot Carver, right? So we're just looking for that white water. That's exactly what we're looking for.
I know rules of the road is another one that is a big ticket item for everybody on the lake that we run into a lot. The majority of the time that we're having safety issues with the rules of the road violations are in these coves, or coming out of the cove into the big water. And that would be people traveling outside of their lane of travel. So if you think of everything like a roadway and you split the cove or the channel in the middle, you should be operating in the center to the right, and everybody should be following that. So if you're meeting someone, they shouldn't be in your lane of travel. They should be opposite of you. Now, it's everyone's job to avoid a collision. So if someone is violating and the only way for you to avoid a collision is to operate where you're not supposed to, then we understand that. We're not pulling people over for that. We're pulling the person over that caused that issue, or trying to. The big danger issues for us are these blind points and docks where people come around and someone could be backing out of their dock. They don't have a spotter on the back of their boat. They can't see who's coming. Someone's coming the wrong way. They're not expecting them to be there. Collision, or the same thing coming around corners or leaving coves. Like I think the video y'all put up last year was great. It had the Moccasin Creek Cove, the little T-end intersection there. That's a big point that we have a lot of violations right there. And then if someone is stopped, we get a lot of violations where people don't slow to idle speed and they just try to get around it, and then they're in someone else's travel lane, something like that. So we're always operating center to right of the channel in these narrow coves and trying to avoid collisions. So any questions about kind of what we're looking for on that? We're trying to look at safety issues. The majority of the time we're looking to avoid collisions. So that's why we're out there enforcing that one so tough, is because we're trying to keep that boat incident number where it is at 0.
There's a common denominator in all 2-vessel boat incidents, and that's rules of the road. If somebody or both boats are not violating rules of the road, they're not going to hit, right? So that's why we hit on that so hard.
So in a channel, everyone should be operating center to right, even out on the big water. There are times when you're crossing the lake, or when you're coming out of these bigger coves like Anchorage and Timpson and that kind of stuff, when you're gonna have to take a channel and move certain ways. But if you're entering those, where we see it the most is like someone coming from the north side of the lake going into Timpson Cove, and instead of coming down and taking that turn wide to Burton Island, they'll just cut across right there. So is that technically a narrow channel? No, but you're entering a narrow channel and causing problems for every single person coming out that's in that correct way. So that's a safety issue for us and where we would be in violation. If you're in the main body of the water by safety man, and this is what we ran into last year a lot, is we had people tubing traveling down the left side of the lake, and there's 6 boats coming in their direction, and they're trying to fight their way through these 6 boats. That's an issue. If you're out there all alone and there's no one coming that way, and you're making a loop to turn or whatever, then we're probably not going to mess with you, right? But if you're putting yourself in a situation that could potentially be dangerous because of where you're positioned at, then yeah, we're probably going to have a conversation about rules of the road.
The rules of the road for boating, which I see a Navy jacket over here. I don't know if you were actually in the Navy, but so the rules of the road for boating are very broad. Okay, it's a catch-all that deals with any navigation rule, whether it is being on the right-hand side of the channel like he's talking about, or the crossing situations. That's what, more than likely, if we stop you in the main basin, the main bay of the lake for a rules of the road violation, it's not going to be because you're on a specific side. If you're out in that big water, it's going to be because the way you're driving has created some kind of crossing situation that was improper. Does that make sense? So we're not, like I said, we're not splitting hairs out here.
I think the last year we had a big conversation about, because if I live 3 doors down from somebody, I pull out, go, if I go 3 doors down, I have to go all the way across the lake, and you know what I'm saying?
By the letter of law, yes.
So you do, right? And you guys said last one, again, I understand this, right? If you see me come out and go 3 doors down, you don't know necessarily that I'm going 3 doors or where I'm going.
Right.
I'm not going to get pulled over for that, right?
Good chance, yeah.
Because we had a lot of conversation with that last year.
Right, and every one of us operates under discretion of understanding of what's going on. And so if we stop you and you say that, and we verify, and we're probably just going to push away and say, hey, just be careful and be aware. Now, if we observe you traveling a distance that is significant, then yeah, we're probably going to have a serious conversation about it, right? No, you're traveling across the main body. That's just a crossing situation. So you're going to have your giveaway. You're setting yourself up for giveaway with multiple lanes of traffic coming from each direction. So knowing your giveaway laws around, okay, who has the right of way? Do I need to slow down and let them pass, or do I need to be the stand-on vessel? But outside of rules of the road, you're traveling straight across the lake. That's not a violation.
I'm going to ask you all a question. In a crossing situation, what boat has the right of way?
Boat approaching from the right.
Any vessel on the right-hand side has the right of way, right? So doesn't matter if it's a sailboat, if it's an offshore racing boat, a jet ski, a boat just like yours. It has nothing to do with size, has nothing to do with mine cost $100,000, his cost $3 million. It doesn't matter. What matters is boats on the right have the right of way in any crossing situation. And both vessels are required to take any evasive action to avoid an incident. So if you say, no, I'm the stand on and I am not getting out of the way. I am not getting out of the way. If you make it through it, you're getting charged too. So, yeah, exactly. But
That brings in the law of the biggest.
yeah, that's where that one comes in. Yeah,
But a lot of people don't know that.
you're very correct. You're very correct. What about an overtaking situation? If I'm driving down the lake this way, and y'all are coming up behind me wanting to overtake, which side do you need to go on? Left, right? What do you say?
Legally, you can go on both sides.
There you go. The safest,
Go on the left side.
well, the safest route is it. So if you've got more water, if I'm over here on the shoreline, 150 feet off the docks, then the safer route would be going left. If I'm out on the very left edge of my lane of traffic, the safer route would more than likely be to the right. So
9 times out of 10 at Burton, if you go to the right, you're gonna be within the 100.
you're going. That's exactly right.
We see that all the time, and then we stop that person, and they're, the education there is, well, if you can't pass within 100 foot, then you have to power down to idle speed, make your adjustment, and then power back up again. And that's the number one thing that people don't want to do is slow down.
There's nothing wrong in boating with taking your right hand, putting it forward, and pulling it back just a little bit, right? There's nothing wrong with that. So a lot of people get confused there. Exactly, same thing. All right, what else? So that's got rules of the road. We're clear on that, right? So rules of the road, 100 foot. Those are our two biggest complaints and probably our two biggest reasons for stops up here. Now let's talk a little about no wake. We've already told you what this gentleman said. If you can see white water out the back of the boat, that's a no wake. It's common sense. Just slow down. And if you're barely creating a wake, majority of the time we're going to pull up and say, hey, slow it down a little bit. We may even just give you a hand sign. We may not pull all the way up. But if we do pull up, we're going to do that safety inspection like I talked about earlier, because we do that on every single one of our stocks. Do these minor infractions lead to major infractions sometimes? Yes. So we may move on into a BUI investigation. So let me tell you a little bit what to expect on that. Is it against the law to drink a beer and drive a boat? No. Is it against the law to have an open container on your boat? No. So what do you think I'm looking for when it comes to boating under the influence? I'm looking for impairment, right? I'm not looking to lock up every one of y'all. That's not what I'm looking to do. I like my job, but I'm not looking for that. But what I am looking to do, as I said earlier, is make sure that you, your loved ones, the three of us, all of us get home safe. That's what we're looking for. And the number one cause of boating fatalities is operating with improper lights. Number two cause is operating under the influence. Does everyone in here understand that there's a difference in being knee wobbling, can't stand up drunk, and being under the influence of alcohol or drugs to the extent that they're less safe? So the way the courts have looked at that and the way we enforce it is less safe means if you are less safe to operate a vehicle, a boat, whatever the case may be, than a sober individual. That's the way the courts, that's the standard. So if you're less safe to operate than someone who has not been drinking, then that meets the standard for a boating under the influence. So we're not looking for one beer, okay? If you've had one beer, and hopefully our officers are trained well enough that if you've only had one beer, we're not even going to screen you. We're going to say, have a great day. watch your alcohol consumption, and we're going to get you on your way. If we're seeing signs of impairment due to either the way you're driving or the way you behave during our encounter, that 2 or 3 minute encounter there, then we may ask you to put on a life jacket, step over into our boat. Once again, we're not splitting hairs. We are looking for people who are not safe to drive. And that could be, what percentage of the population do you think is not on some kind of prescription drug at this point that affects their driving motor ability? I would say it's a very low percentage, wouldn't you? So it could be a combination of a couple of beers and your medication. It could be, but we're looking for that impairment, okay? We're not looking to just put you on the boat, screen you just because you had a beer. That's not what we're doing. Like I said, I've been doing this 25 years, and when it comes to BUI arrest, I've led the state just about every year in BUI arrest, and I generally, sometimes the Southeast, sometimes the nation, whatever. But with that being said, I'm never looking for somebody who is not impaired. Now those numbers have been because I've been in a target-rich environment. I'm not in a target-rich environment up here, I don't think. So, but I just want you to understand that's what we're looking for, is impairment. If we ask you to put on a life jacket, step into our boat, the majority of the people that get on our boat and go through the field sobriety exercises, the majority of them, not the minority, the majority of them are going to be placed right back on their boat and told to have a good day. Okay? Okay? We're trying to use those exercises to rule out the impairment. Our goal is to get you home. Our goal is not to waste 2 hours going to the Rabun County Jail and getting home later to our wives. That's not our goal. So, does it happen? Absolutely. But we are trying to, what the field sobriety does, it gives us an opportunity to observe you do simple, divided attention exercises that anyone in this room could do. And we're going to observe your behavior on that and see how you do. And then we're going to mesh it all together and make a decision on what's best. If you're under influence, yes, we're going to arrest you. We do a breathalyzer at the end. But what we do is an Alka sensor. So our standard battery of exercises would be horizontal gaze nystagmus, where that's the little eye thing. You watch a cop's video and you see them looking at the eyes. That's an involuntary jerking of the eyes that you don't even know is going on. You can't control it, and it's certain drugs and alcohol are what causes that. And so we're looking at that. That's a very scientifically based test. We do that, then we do a finger to nose exercise, a hand pat, and a hand coordination test. So everything's seated. We're not asking you to limp around the boat. We're not asking you to do a walk and turn, one leg stand in the moving water. Everything is seated right there. And then at the conclusion of those, we do check on Alka sensor. The Alka sensor does give us a number, but that number is not admissible in court. So we're not going to tell you that number. We're not going to discuss that number amongst ourselves. What we're using that for is to see if the impairment we're seeing is based on alcohol or drugs. So if it came back and said, if we had a lot of impairment there and we saw 000 on the box, we'd say, oh, wait a minute, we need to go into some additional exercises and we need to get out our advanced roadside drug stuff, and we need to put you through some different exercises that would determine whether it's a drug other than alcohol that's causing that. So
Donate some blood.
yeah, so that's what we use that for.
So the area here has a lot of alcohol and drinking. Do you respond to phone calls if someone from here says someone just left in a boat who is totally?
Absolutely. If anyone called and said, hey, we think there's an impaired boater on the lake, we would drop what we're doing and go look for that person. Yeah.
Good description of the vessel, color, make, model, whatever, and what the operator is wearing would be very helpful.
Now, if it's nighttime, we'll talk about lights here in a minute, but if it's nighttime and we're pulling you over, what do you think you should expect that's different than what we do in the daytime? Anything? What's the first thing you're going to see if we stop you at night? You're going to see a spotlight first. We're going to hit you with a spotlight so that we can identify the driver, we can identify the occupants of the boat, then we're going to hit the blue lights. What generally will happen is I would hit you with a spotlight, cut the spotlight off while I hit the blue lights, because if I'm blinding you with the spotlight, you may not see my blue lights. So spotlight on, then off, blue lights, then the spotlight's coming back on. Why do you think I turned the spotlight back on? Bingo. I want to make sure you're not switching drivers, because I have seen some very creative moves over the years of people sliding out, and I mean, it's a dance sometimes. But also officer safety. I don't know what's in your boat. I don't know who's in your boat. Don't know whether you have weapons or whatever. So y'all have to understand, when we pull up to these boats, we're in a very vulnerable position. I understand nobody in this room is going to try to hurt us. I get that. But when he and I are working together and we have both of our hands on the gunnel of a boat and we're leaning over trying to keep them from beating together, what's exposed on my body? Everything from here up, right? You could hit me with a boat paddle, a fire extinguisher, a fist, whatever. So we're going to be a little more vigilant at night, trying to make sure none of that happens. So that's why the spotlight's coming out. At night, the #1 cause of boat fatalities is operating with improper or without lights. So if we see light violations, 100% of the time, if we can get to you and stop you, we are going to stop you. So, and it may be as simple as an education, a verbal guidance. It may be a written warning, citation, whatever. We're just trying to change behavior and keep people safe. So, does everybody understand the light requirements on a boat? Everybody knows what you have to have. So you have to have a red and green bow light, or in some of these larger boats, it'll be side lights. Red and green side lights, a white light that's visible 360 degrees. Depending on your boat, it may be a midship light that's pointing forward and out, and then a stern light on the back, or it may be just a simple stern light pole that covers everything. But it's got to be visible 360 degrees. So
we're thinking about, as a safety thing, like at the concert, if we notice somebody doesn't have a red or green light, is to have some glow sticks there for them. Would that be okay to get them home?
It would get them home. I'm not going to promise that it would prevent us from stopping them, because there's distance requirements on those lights, right? And we may not be able to see them at the required distance. And if we can't see them, I've already got the blue lights on. If I notice the lights after the fact, I'm still going to go and pull you over, because that was, didn't meet the letter of the law. But it would certainly get them home safer. That's a great idea. We do the same thing. Anytime we issue a citation for somebody without lights or a warning or whatever, we're going to get them the proper lights and get them moving, and that's what we do as well. So, great idea.
The same thing, I'm sure y'all seen it, but if you look out there right now, you can see all these pontoon boats with the lights that are bent back or hanging or whatever. Well, what happens when you leave that canopy the way that it is if you're coming from a certain direction, you're unable to see it because the light is improper. And we make that stop all the time, and we get closer to it, and then it's like, oh, they actually do have a light, but we couldn't see it. Well, it's got to be 360 degrees. And then what we run into as well is in the summertime, especially, it's hot and it's a night, it's cooler, and everybody wants to put it completely down. Well, now it's even back there, and the only time you can see it is when you're in the very rear of the vessel approaching. And so that's an issue. So we make those stops as well, and those are pretty common for us too. Typically they're functional, they're just improper because you can't see them from that 360 degree.
Yeah, we're not looking for many 57 Chevrolets out here. That's what they look like. The pontoon boat comes, older car coming at you. But that is definitely improper lights. If they are any kind of light that is interfering with the red and green, then that's going to be a problem. You see the same thing with fishing boats out here. They'll have lights around the cockpit to light things up, or the ski boats with the different flashing lights. All that can be considered improper. If it is, I guess, affecting or interfering with the red and green lights, then it would be improper and it will get stopped. So, and everybody understands the reason for that, right? The red and green lights along with the white light, that's what tells us direction of travel. So I've had several opportunities to have somebody put their red and green light in the back of the boat and the white light in the front of the boat, or swap the red and green lenses. And not only is that confusing, but if you're both running on plane and they've got those lights backwards, boy, it's really easy to get in an accident like that.
Or the red and green on both sides of the front of the vessel.
Yeah.
On a pontoon, we run into that where people buy the combo deal and put it on both sides of their boat, and then there's 2 greens and 2 reds.
Yeah. So you'll see all of that stuff, and like I said, that's the #1 cause of boating fatalities. Yeah, if you were gonna, and I would recommend go on and carry some kind of extra lights on your boat, whether it's chem lights or an extra stern light bulb or whatever, keep that stuff with you, because man, it's very often that you get out to the fireworks and man, they were working when I left the boathouse, but they're not working now. So now what do? Let's talk about how to use the docking lights properly, or a spotlight. You think it's okay just run down the lake throwing your spotlight around everywhere? What happens when you're driving your car on the highway? You can see to the end of the beams of your headlight, right? You can't see anything that's beyond that. Have you ever noticed how far you can see out here at night with no lights other than your navigation lights on? You can see probably from here to, well, as far as I could see in the daylight, I would be able to see that at night more than likely. So when you run a spotlight or docking lights, it messes with your night vision and it takes that ability away. So the minute you turn that spotlight on, you're only going to see to the end of the beam, and then when you turn it off, there's going to be a brief period of time that it takes your eyes to adjust so that you get that night vision back. So the way that I would recommend you using those docking lights or a spotlight is, let's say you're not 100% sure what's in front of you. I know as we get older, it's more difficult to see at night, so those lights make it much more comfortable. I know that, but turn them on, look to see what's in front of you, flip them back off, drive to the end of that beam or slightly past, flip them on, flip them off. That's perfectly legal. Same thing with a spotlight. You want to light up this cove, make sure there's no boats with no lights, fine. Run out through there, half mile, whatever. Do it again, however far you need to. That's totally fine. But don't just sit there waving that spotlight around, because not only is it messing with your night vision, but it's messing with all the other boaters as well. It's taking away their ability to be able to see what's around them. So that's how you're supposed to use them, or illuminating the dock, as it says, docking lights. So
in the past, we've compared it to the 100-foot rule. So when you're within 100 feet of your docking, you can flip them on and leave them on as you're approaching your dock, so that you can see to get in your slip or on a neighbor's dock or whatever it may be. And then when you're leaving, same thing. You turn the boat around and you start leaving that dock. You flip them off and move away.
It would be okay for them to have them if they're anchored. It doesn't matter. As long as they've got a white 360 light, they can have every disco light in the world on if they're anchored out. It's when they're moving that the problem is. So, but they do, if you're anchored, you do have to have the white 360-degree light on. So, and I ran into that a lot on Lanier. People would pull up and be doing things they shouldn't have been doing on the lake, and everybody want to turn the lights off, and another speedboat come and hit them. That happens a lot. You have to have a life jacket or a ski belt if you're wake surfing while you're attached to the boat. So that.
But technically you're not attached.
I was going to say, you have to be attached to get up, so it would be very, very difficult to take your life jacket off once you get up surfing. So yeah, we treat it as if you have to. We're probably not going to, if you're not attached to the boat, we're not going to write you a ticket on it, but that's a Georgia power regulation, okay? That's not a state law, but it is 50 feet from the shoreline.
Yeah. If you read the Georgia power regulation, it is 50 feet from the shoreline, not the dock.
And you have to have it out
Memorial to Labor.
And it's my understanding they do remove them when you leave them.
My 100% recommendation, if you're trying to navigate off of someone's buoy, is not to, because there's no standard of how they measured that, and majority of the time they're out illegally distanced from the shore, probably too far, and that's going to give you a false sense of reference to the distance from someone's the 100-foot rule, if that's what you're using it for.
You know, the best thing about those buoy balls, the guy brought it up in the Georgia Power meeting the other day, they make a really good slalom course for the jet skis. So just be careful if all your neighbors in the cove have got the buoys out. I know 18-year-old Jason would have been out there slaloming around them, and maybe even 25-year-old Jason, but, you know, so just be careful of that. The problem with it, and I have worked these accidents as well, there's a law in the books about regulating waterways. So if you go in and you're tired of the no wake in front of your dock, so you put a buoy out, and it's not approved by us in Georgia Power. If somebody comes through at night and hits that buoy, or pulls a skier through there and hits that buoy, you're going to get charged with regulating a waterway, and you're going to get sued 100%. So if that buoy is not supposed to be there. So that's something you have to think about on these. Yeah, that's something you have to think about on these swim buoys as well. If somebody hits it, you probably could be held liable for it, because it's not supposed to be there technically, if it's outside of Georgia Power's regulation. Let's say you put it 75 feet instead of 50, I would imagine you'd be responsible. PWCs, you want to talk about who can operate?
Sure. Anyone 12 years old can operate a PWC or older with a boater's education class. So I don't know many 12-year-olds who are that responsible to go 70 miles an hour on the water, but people trust their kids to do some crazy things, and we stop a lot of kids. That's the majority of what we stop on jet skis. We also see a lot of operation after sunset with jet skis, and the majority of the time it's kids who either don't know the law, or they're just out past whatever time their parents told them to come home. And usually when we escort them back to the dock to make sure they get there safely, the parents are pretty upset that they're out. But
they're usually mad at us for messing with kids.
That too. So it can be tough, because the majority of people who've taken that boater's ed class that are young don't retain the information as those who are a little older and more mature that take the class. And so we find a lot of violations with the kids, and we try to do as much education and verbal guidance around that as we can to help them improve everyone's experience on the lake. The major violations that we see with jet skis is, of course, people violating the 100-foot rule. You can't operate a jet ski within 100 foot of another jet ski or vessel and be under power legally, and that law was put in place to create or to slow down the accidents where people are splashing or cutting donuts or doing whatever they're doing, because they're so quickly agile and maneuverable. They tend to want to get very close to each other, and that creates a lot of problems and violations. And with that too, we see with these big wake boats, the big waves, we get jet skis coming way too close to boats, especially when they're towing people. We made that stop a few times last year where people were then, 50 to 25 feet of someone being towed on a tube or a skier or a wake surfer, and a jet ski comes by, and all it takes is them hitting the water at the wrong angle and shooting one way, and now you have a boating incident where someone's been hit. So we try to make sure that we're enforcing that pretty strictly. That's a huge safety thing for us, and we want to make sure that we're keeping everybody out of harm's way. The boating incident that we had was related to a wake where when the guy went over the wake, it was so big and he wasn't controlling it the way he needed to and lost control. And the same thing can happen on the PWCs. So that's why we're out there really watching these PWCs operate around other vessels, making sure they're not violating that distance restriction and jumping the waves and whatnot. So as long as that vessel has a mirror on board, that is 100% legal. If there's no mirror on board for the operator to observe the driver, then that is a violation. But if I'm rolling down the lake and I see someone wake surfing and the person is standing with their back to the front of the boat watching the guy surf and they're going down the lake, that's an issue. And that's what he talked about earlier with the people dancing in front of the driver. It's distracted driving. It can be reckless. It can be all kinds of things because you're not focusing your attention on driving. You're focusing on the person in the back. So that's why the mirror is there, is for you to observe while you operate. We always recommend you have an observer in the boat because it's so much safer than just having that one person. We run into that with jet skis and with other boats as well, mostly pontoon boats, because it's hard to put a mirror on a pontoon boat typically. And so we get, dad out there early on a Sunday morning towing kids, and he's all by himself and he's doing this number, watching, trying to keep his kids safe, but he's not watching where he's going, and there's all this boat traffic. So that's a big issue for us, is not having an observer. Legally, as long as there's a mirror in place, and a lot of times you'll see us throw up a pair of binoculars and look at boats that are towing people, trying to locate either an observer or a mirror to see what's going on that boat. An observer, and the person on the jet ski does not have to be turned around backwards and ride backwards to watch. They can ride normal and just turn around. It's not illegal to tow anyone on a jet ski. We see it. We see it a lot. Yeah, we see it a lot as long as you have an observer. There's a fine line with that, what is safe and what is legal. So what we see a lot is there's a jet ski that accommodates 3 people. You got 2 people on board, the driver and the observer, and then you have 3 people on a tube, okay? So it's not illegal, but if something happens to that tube and it gets a hole in it, or you break the rope or whatever, now you have 3 people on a tube and not anywhere, no way to get them out of the water or put them anywhere without going to drop someone off. So now they're floating in the lake or doing whatever, right? So, my recommendation is don't exceed your capacity, but it's not against the law, and we see that a lot as well. So that's just another one of those like safety awareness things. Like if something were to happen, how are you safely going to get everybody where they need to go? Because if you leave, they're in the middle of the lake in the water. No one can see a head and hands as well as they can see a boat, right? So something to think about for people.
And when you're towing, make sure you designate someone as the observer. Don't just assume that mom's going to watch, or that, little brother's going to watch. Designate someone, say your job while they're skiing or while they're wake surfing, whatever, is to watch them. If you see any boats get too close, let me know. If you see them fall, let me know. And I say that because I don't know, I talk about Lanier a lot. I don't know how many of y'all have been on Lanier, but in the main water in Flowery Branch Creek, I had a kid just bobbing out in the middle. Boats coming from every direction. I mean, literally a dangerous situation. And I pulled up, I was like, what is going on? The kid is sobbing. I said, what's the matter? I was tubing and they left me. I said, what do you mean they left you? He had fallen off his tube. I could not even see the boat that he came off of. Had to chase the boat down probably 3/4 of a mile and before I could get this kid back on their boat. Now, did they get a tongue lashing? Yes. I probably didn't. I probably was not as respectful to them as I will be to most of y'all. But terrible. So make sure you have somebody watching back there, because stuff happens so fast on the water.
It has to be attached to you legally. Doesn't have to be on your wrist. It can be attached to your life jacket or something, but yeah, it has to be attached.
And we will stop you for that. Other thing, if the grandkids are on a jet ski and their life jacket's not fastened, we're going to stop them, because what's going to happen if you fall off and hit your head, if you're wearing one of the old orange cheap life jackets that nobody wears that goes around behind your neck, if you get knocked out with that on, it will right you and float you the correct way. If you're wearing one of the jackets like everybody likes to wear, they're either zips or buttons up, that one will not. However you fall in the water is how you're going to be. If you're face down, you're face down. So, but as far as it not being fastened, it's not going to stay on you. If you're knocked off, and unless you're thinking to hold it like this, it's not staying on you. It's coming right off. So it does no good. So to speak a little more on that point on the buckled jackets, 10 or 12 years ago, I watched a guy jump a cruiser wake. He had his life jacket unbuckled. He got a lot of air. Came down, fell off the jet ski. I found his life jacket and flip-flops floating. We still have not found that man. So, and that's been 10 or 12 years ago. So make sure, and that's why we're going to stop you when we see it. So make sure they're buckled.
So the 100-foot law actually applies to the furthest extension of your boat. So a tube, skier, anything like that has to be 100 feet away. So if something like that happens, you're not only in violation, but now you're part of a boating incident. And I worked one on Lake Chatoog 2 years ago where a dad slung his son and his girlfriend into a dock, and they both ended up in the hospital for over a month in critical condition. Both broken femurs, broken ribs, broken arms, everything. So
and we will, I've talked about education a lot up here. Let me just be clear on something. If you're swinging to swing people into the dock and you get them within an unsafe distance, I won't say 100 feet, but if they're within an unsafe distance, you are going to get a ticket at the least. It's going to happen. So whether it's your dock, whether it's somebody else's dock, it doesn't matter. 100 feet on plane. So above idle speed, he can be running as fast as he can as long as he's 100 feet out. But as far as idling, he can get any distance. I mean, if he's at idle speed, there's no buffer zone.
Well, they come a lot closer than that.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking for. And like I said earlier, we're not looking for the ones that are creating a wake, that high. That's not what we're looking for unless they're right up against your dock. Call Star DNR on a AT&T or Bell South phone, and it will connect us to the closest person. Star DNR or 911 will too. They'll get in touch with us. Aside from giving everyone, it wouldn't do any good for me to give y'all all my cell phone number because I only work 3 out of 4 weekends, and I may be at Tallulah Gorge, I may be at Lake Hartwell, I may be different places. So those are the best 2 ways.
A lot of the rock retaining walls that are out here that don't have a house, like when you leave La Prads and you start, I call it the S-curve, but when you start going around and people shoot that gap and they're 20 foot off of that rock wall, they're in violation. You have to actually move with the channel to stay outside of that 100 foot if you're above idle speed. So.
You guys have body cam?
We do. Yeah. He's wearing his now. Ours are in the truck, but yeah. So you'll see us with a little phone there. We have to turn, and it's a recording device, but we turn them on every stop. So, and it's great when, I obviously was working well before we had those. And when we got them, I thought that was the worst thing ever for law enforcement is to have everything recorded. But it's been wonderful because 99% of the complaints that I've had to investigate on my officers over the years, I've been able to say, there's camera footage. Would you like to come watch it? And it really changes. Well, maybe he didn't call me that, or they'll, maybe I just thought he said that, Yeah.
Really cool.
I used to, I couldn't wear all this stuff, but over time I can put more and more stuff on my belt. So pepper spray, handcuffs, pistol, nothing else run back. There's extra magazines to the pistol, a flashlight, a taser. You do not want any part of that. If police ever pull out the taser, just tell them to shoot you. This shoot me, I don't want the taser.
Y'all had to get tased. You want to be shot, not tased.
A tourniquet, and we're going to use that on people as well, or on y'all if you get hurt or something, but it's more for self-rescue, you know, if we were to take a bullet or a knife wound or something. And radio, and he's got his rangefinder in his pocket. But we all carry the same similar stuff. So it weighs, what, 25, 20?
Between 18.
Yeah, between 18 and 22 pounds. So
Some people carry
Water without a life jacket.
at least 15 minutes.
We did it for over an hour in the academy with all this. So
Yeah. So you'd be surprised that just breath control, you can tread water as long as you want to. Now, if you're built like Matt over there, just all muscle, they have a little hard time treading water sometimes. But fat guy like me will float. So yeah.
So we carry a boat bag too, and typically we have we carry our PVT, boat and safety handbooks, water, binoculars, our rangefinder, like everything we need on the boat. We have a designated bag for that with a ticket book or whatever we have in there that we can.
For today's day and time, we carry Narcan.
Yeah,
You know, and no defibrillator.
we do not have an AED. And then we have different equipment for different parts of the season. So I mean, you know, I'm kind of OCD, so I have bags for everything, and everything has a place. So right now is my boating stuff in my truck, but like come hunting season, I don't really carry my boating stuff much. I carry my PFD in case I need to respond to something, but like I don't have everyday stuff out with me. So,
And we do have some boating books. If everybody would like a copy, I think we've got enough probably for everyone. So we'll get y'all that as you leaving.
Jason, yeah, let's give him a big hand. Jason, Spencer, and Matt, thank you so much for coming out this morning. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you for your participation. I think you had some great questions. I hope you are able to leave with a better understanding of their job and what they're looking for on the lake. We have recorded this, and we will be putting this out on a video. So if you run into any friends or neighbors who said, gosh, I wish I had gone to that, maybe fill them in a little bit and tell them to look for the video to come out. So thank you again for coming this morning.
Thank y'all.